Welcome to the Brave Woman Mighty God podcast. I'm your host, Laura L. Smith. Join me as I chat with the most amazing guests about how God can and will empower us to do the same brave things the women of the Bible did. Stand up for justice, say yes, be the change, do the crazy things, step into freedom, find community, reach out, share our gifts, and so much more. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss a single episode. Today, I'm chatting with Kelly Minter. Kelly is a musician and Bible teacher who is passionate about teaching the Word of God. When she's not singing, writing, or speaking, you can find her picking homegrown vegetables with her 6 nieces and nephews or working alongside Justice and Mercy International. A Southern transplant, she delights in college football, long walks, and a diner mug full of her favorite Justice Blend coffee. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today on the Brave Woman Mighty God podcast. Hey, listen, I am actually headed to Nashville this weekend, and I know you live there, so I want to know what your favorite restaurant in Nashville is.
Well, you're asking at a bad time because my favorite restaurant just closed a few months ago. It was called Josephine, and I just absolutely loved it. And so I don't know that I've found like a new favorite yet. I will say Nashville is known for its really great restaurants. And so there are so many to choose from. And I haven't really ventured out since my I don't think I have a good, I'm trying to think of like if I have a good second choice. But there is a restaurant called Adele's. I do really like Adele's, and that's been around for maybe 10 years, and that's a good steady option. That's
okay. I'll have to check that one out, and I'm very sorry to hear about Josephine. So sad. So sad. It happens. It happens. Restaurant business is tough. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously you love Josephine's, but I also know that you adore the women of the Bible because you have 2 Bible studies dedicated to 2 of the women of the Bible. You have one for Ruth and one for Esther, both women I adore and who both get their own chapters in my new book, Brave Woman, Mighty God. But who is your favorite woman in the Bible, and why is she your favorite?
You know, I will say again, I probably don't have a favorite, but one of my favorites, I'll put it that way, is I really love Elizabeth in Luke's gospel. I really love that she was so faithful, even in her childlessness, and knowing that in that culture, to be a Jewish woman, to be married to a priest and to not have children was such an oxymoron for the God follower.
Yeah.
Really, because it's like, hey, we follow the one true God. He created the world. He blessed us and told us to be fruitful and multiply. And so if we can't multiply in that way, then what's happening? God must be displeased. And yet we see in Luke's gospel so clearly that Elizabeth and her husband Zechariah were righteous and they were blameless in their pursuit of the Lord. And she could not bear children. Not only could she not bear them, but then she was also at this point past childbearing age. So I love her because I love her persistence. I love her faithfulness. And then, of course, I love the story of her truly supernaturally getting pregnant and the Lord blessing her with a child, even in her barrenness and even in her old age. And I love where she says in chapter 1, where she says, the Lord has done this for me. And just her joy and the beauty of what she got to be part of. And then how she encourages Mary when Mary comes to her. And Mary's pregnant with the Messiah, and just that there's no jealousy and there's no comparison. It's just, she just pours out the blessing and the love of God upon her relative Mary. And so I would say Elizabeth she's way up there for me. There's so many reasons to love her.
No, that's awesome. And you brought up such a good point about there's no comparison because she could have easily, all that time that she was still being righteous and obedient and faithful to God when she wasn't pregnant, she could have been like, well, this isn't fair. And this girl got pregnant and she's not following God and she has 10 kids. But we don't hear that about her at all. And then even like you said, with Mary coming, it could have been like, well, you know, you're only 13 and here I am way past childbearing. How'd it happen for you so fast? You didn't even try to get pregnant. You got pregnant. Like it could be, I hear like all the lies that we hear and that we tell ourselves when we compare, and then that Satan just uses to really destroy good things God is doing in us, because God had reasons. Like he was going to give Elizabeth John the Baptist, and it had to be at the same time that Mary was pregnant. Like his timing was perfect, as it always is. But if she had like thwarted it or been super angry or tried so hard to be like the people she was comparing herself to, she couldn't have experienced all the beauty and grace that God had for her.
Yes.
What a great example of like avoiding comparisons. Like we're all guilty of them, but what a good reminder of how to and why to.
Yeah, that's why. So I just love her. I love her. She's amazing.
3 cheers for Elizabeth. We love her. No, that's awesome. I love her. That's a great Great example. Great way to start the conversation. Okay, so speaking of comparisons, a lot of us see things that we want, think we need certain things in our lives. We have to have that water bottle, those slippers, blah blah blah, name it. And so we go to our favorite online store, Amazon, and when we hear the word Amazon in our culture, that's what we think of. We think of, oh, that's a place I can get my new phone case. That's where I can like get that book I want to read. But I think from what I know about you, when you hear the word Amazon, something totally different comes to your mind. So, can you share with us how you have this countercultural definition of Amazon and why it matters to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my mind goes to the place from which Amazon.com derived its name, which is the Amazon jungle and the Amazon River. And that's where I do a lot of work. I'm so honored to be able to do that. I work with an organization called Justice and Mercy International, and we work in the Eastern European country of Moldova, which is right between Ukraine and Romania. So you may have heard a little bit about them in the news recently with the war going on between Ukraine and Russia. But we work with orphan and vulnerable children there. And then we work with jungle pastors and vulnerable children in the Amazon as well and in the jungle. And so I've been going since 2009 with them and lots of different types of trips. But one of my favorite things, which I'm about to leave for in a few weeks, is our annual Jungle Pastors Conference, where men and women, jungle pastors, missionaries, indigenous people come from all over the jungle. Some of them we actually even fly in on small little planes to get them there, and they boat in, and we have a week of fellowship, training, teaching, meals together, enrichment, and it's absolutely amazing. So I love my work there. And then I also take a trip every year called our Serve and Study trip. And it's for women across the country. So if you're listening, you might want to jump on this year. I think we have a few slots left, but we take 35 women and we are all on a boat together and we spend a week and we do Bible teaching, worship, but we also serve the people in the jungle. And it's amazing. We do sightseeing. It is truly one of the best weeks of the year. It's incredible. So I always love that as well.
That's beautiful. Okay, so tell me two things. One, a little bit about how you serve the people on that trip, because you said you do Bible teaching and worship, but how you actually serve people. And then also, when you do that, I want to get back to what is a jungle pastor, because I think we all might have an idea in our head, but from what I've heard you talk about, like what they are doing is so incredible that I think people just need to know more about them.
That's a great question. So yeah, I'll answer the first one. So for our Serve and Study trip, we work with our jungle pastors that we already have relationship with, that are at our conferences, and we go to their villages. So we choose a few, we go to their villages, primarily to theirs, get to see them, get to work with them. And then we do a lot for kids. So we'll do like a vacation Bible school kind of thing for the kids. We also have a group that will work with mothers, because a lot of the moms just have hard lives, long days. And think about our long, hard days, but then with heat, no AC, not even covered walls a lot of the time. I mean, the windows are wide open, not always knowing where they're going to get food for their kids, dealing with their kids' illnesses without a doctor. So those kinds of things, we get to minister to the moms. And then we also get to make house visits where we go to individual homes that are pretty remote, and maybe someone is sick and they can't get out, or there's a person with a child with special needs and they need a special visit. And so we rotate groups and it's really fun. So you're with your group, and one day maybe you're working with the kids, maybe one day you're working with moms, maybe one day you're making house visits. Yeah. So that's a little bit of how our Serve and Study works. And yeah, the question about the jungle pastor is a great question. They're really indigenous pastors who minister in the jungle. And so what you have is, just to give people a little bit of a picture, because sometimes that helps me. The Amazon jungle is massive. I mean, beyond anything we can put our brains around. It's huge. But there's a main city, and there's a few major cities, but the capital city of the state of Amazonas is the city of Manaus, and it sits on the river. And there are some of our pastors were maybe born and raised in Manaus or living in Manaus and got the call to go truly deep into the jungle to give their lives. Some were born and raised in the jungle and met the Lord, and then, just kept continuing to minister from that place. So that's a little bit how that works. But the jungle is really the jungle. It's what you think. A lot of our pastors and wives, none of them have running water. Or they're fishing for food, or they've got crops, or maybe they're able to buy a little bit of flour or something like that from a local store. They access everything by boat primarily, or like motorcycle, and they serve in that environment. And that's their living environment. That's their way of life. And it's pretty unbelievable. Yeah. What they do and what they're able to pull off.
And how many people might they serve? I'm sure it varies, but a typical or average jungle pastor, how many people might
Yeah,
they be serving?
that's another great question. So there are like cities in the jungle, and some of our pastors minister in some of those cities, which are more urban, and there might be thousands of people in the city, and they might have 40, 50, 60 people that come to their church. We have jungle pastors on the absolute end of that other opposite end of that spectrum, where they're in tribes, like they've been invited into indigenous tribes, and those are protected by the government, and a chief of that tribe has to invite an outsider in. And we have some of our jungle pastors that have been invited in that have set up church there, and they might have anywhere from 10 to 100 people attending. And then we have jungle pastors that are ministering in very small villages, and a lot of them even have things that they call preaching points, where maybe they'll have 30 people on a Sunday morning, but then on a Tuesday, they might walk 4 or 5 miles to a tiny little village, and maybe 6 people meet with them at that preaching point. And then maybe on the Thursday, they're at another preaching point where they take their motorcycle or they walk, and they get to these little remote places. We might just have one family, just a handful of people. So it really, really varies. But I would say that average, I don't know the average number, but I would say the average jungle pastor for us that we work with is in that, maybe there's 100 to 200 people in their village.
Yeah.
They have a church there.
No, it's so interesting to hear about. I think there's so much work that goes on, and your work specifically with Justice and Mercy International, that so many of us don't even know about or think about. And it's so wonderful, one, to get that on our radar so we can be praying for those pastors who are going to preaching points to actually bring the gospel to 5 people, or, shine a little bit of light on one family. I mean, praise God for them and the work they're doing. And it just helps us, I think, better understand the capital C church and how God is on the move, and that he really is after everyone's heart when we see more of what's going on around the world in places we might not have ever been to.
Yes.
So thank you so much for giving us some of the details, behind the scenes stuff there. But Kelly, you're like a musician who has albums, and you're a Bible teacher who does these awesome Bible studies with Lifeway. You live in Nashville. How did you get started going to the Amazon, working with an organization like Justice and Mercy International?
Yeah. So actually, I had signed a record deal, and this was years back, and I had a love-hate relationship with the music industry. It was not a very successful run. I was in Nashville like the first 8 years, had signed 3 record deals, and it was just difficult the whole way.
Yeah.
Never really had enough success to really sustain me long term. So it was really difficult. But the 3rd record deal that I had, the president of the record company, his name was John Pack, and he worked in the Amazon. And so even though the record company was out of England and he lived in England, he would take trips to the Amazon often. So he was the one that invited me. So it was through my music career that I ended up getting to the Amazon, which was so shocking, because it was not anything I was looking for. And about 2 or 3, maybe 4 years into my work with Justice and Mercy International, John got stomach cancer and ended up passing away. And it was really it was so hard, but it was also sweet in that he had given so much to the people there, and he willed the organization over to this organization that I love, Justice and Mercy International. And so the ministry he was doing in the Amazon really
connected
came under the umbrella of Justice and Mercy, or under the care of Justice and Mercy International. And so now that's a big part, obviously half of what we do. We're in Moldova and then the Amazon. So that's kind of how I got there. It was not, I always say that the Lord tricked me to the Amazon, because I was recording a live record at Abbey Road Studios where the Beatles recorded with all these other musicians, and it was amazing. And I thought, okay, great, here we go. And then next thing I know, that record really didn't sell, and I'm in the Amazon jungle, I'm like, Lord, what happened? But
what happened here?
Yeah. But it's such a testimony, because, especially if someone's listening that's doesn't understand where their life is going or what God is doing. When I look back on my career, coming to Nashville, getting a record deal, writing my first book, writing my first Bible study, getting invited to the Amazon, when you look back at it, it was a straight line. One thing led to the next. It was very linear, but going through it didn't feel linear at all. It felt like dead ends. It felt like left turns, right turns. It felt like disconnected jumps. It didn't feel like anything was moving forward. It's bizarre, because going through it just felt so disconnected, and none of it made sense. And that I was behind, and it was so difficult. And looking back, it's like, oh, that was a straight shot. That was just a straight shot.
Yeah.
Music, book writing, Bible study writing, Amazon, it all flowed just perfectly. But it didn't feel like that. And so I always like, I just always want to encourage people that no matter where you're at, God's not wasting your pain. He's not wasting time. We waste time, but God doesn't waste time. And he's not wasting time. He's leading you forward, and your job is to lean in that time and to walk closely with him, and he doesn't waste any of that.
No, it's so awesome and such a great reminder that he really does use everything for our good and his glory. And even things like, I mean, when you said Abbey Road, I gotta say I geeked out a little bit over here. I'm like, fun. But you would think that a record not doing well would be something bad, but God was using it to get you to the next thing he had for you. And just a reminder, like you said, everyone out there, he really is directing our steps. He really does just want goodness and mercy for us all of our days. And even when it looks like that's not true, we have to remember what is true. And as long as we cling to him, he'll just keep getting us to that next stepping stone and that next one and the next one. Before we know it, we'll be across the river or in the Amazon. Who knows?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Who knows? Okay, Kelly, your work sounds so beautiful. I just love hearing what you're doing for others, and it so aligns with Jesus' teaching. I just wanted to read from Matthew 25 for a second because I think it's exactly what you're doing and such a great reminder to everyone listening that Jesus does actually call us to this work. Like we can say, oh yeah, that's great work, but this isn't just great work. It's actually Jesus' call on our lives as well. So I'm going to read Matthew 25, 34 through 40. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And the king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So Kelly, thank you for actually doing this. Thank you for doing it for Jesus and for all of his people. It's beautiful. And it's inspiring, but not all of us can go to the Amazon jungle. That's not only can not all of us do it, but it's not the call on everyone's life, even though it's the call on all of our lives to serve others. So what do you suggest to the women who's listening and thinks like, gosh, I'd really love to help those in need, but I can't travel to a third world country. Like, what could I possibly do? What would you say to her if you were sitting there having coffee with her?
Well, sure. And I mean, just, in all fairness here, I'm only there 2 weeks out of the year, maybe 3 sometimes. I don't even know if I've been 3 weeks out of the year. So it's a big part of what I do. It's a part of where my resources go and all of that. But that's not my day to day. I'm passionate about it, but you're right. We have to serve where we are. That's not going to be enough. Just a little bit here or there. And so I would say, who has God put around you that is in need? And it might be the elderly. It might be, I think about the foster care system, how many foster care or foster children that there are that need care or adoption, or, like I said, visiting the elderly. There's a man that I know from my church, and he is close to 90. And I just found out that he has been in a rehab facility for a month, and I didn't know he had been there for a month. And so I'm going to go see him tomorrow. And that's a way that it's like, okay, he's lonely. He can't drive. He can't get out. And so it seems like a small thing.
Yeah.
But when I talked to him yesterday on the phone, he said, just hearing your voice and just this phone call is lifting my spirits. Well, we're all going to be in that position where we need someone to come visit us. And so that visiting, even in that text, the prison ministry, I know I worked with Prison Fellowship years and years ago and went into some of the prisons. So I would say it's always going to be a sacrifice, but there also should be a natural connection. If you love kids, well, then help some of these kids. If you love the elderly, if you just enjoy that. My goodness, one of my friend's mothers just recently passed away, so dear, and she was 2 years in a memory care facility. And so we would go visit her, but as we were visiting her, there were other people that we got to know, that we would sit, that we would talk to and just listen to. So we're called across the gamut, or maybe you're good at health and you're a retired nurse. So you can help in those areas, but there's so many ways that we can serve. And you're exactly right. We're called to be about about that right here. And I would say too, like serve out of the places where God has also brought healing in your life. Like maybe he's restored a marriage or he's brought you through cancer or through a hard financial time or as a single mom. And now you're like, okay, I'm on the other side of that. I can give, or I'm in the middle of it, but I have a heart for it and I can serve.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice. I know locally where I live, I'm in Ohio, and I just think within 20 minutes of my house, there's after school programs, there's soup kitchens, there's homeless shelters, there's an awesome national organization called Sleep in Heavenly Peace that builds beds for kiddos who don't have beds and delivers them to their homes. There's an organization called Shoes for the Shoeless that brings like new Nikes to a whole school full of kids who don't have shoes. There's just so many amazing things going on out just near you. I'll name those things off the top of my head where I am. Then I know, right, whoever is listening, there are people around you who could use just a phone call or a visit or a meal or a lot of volunteering. And if, like Kelly said, if there is something you're passionate about, whether that's pregnant teens or playgrounds for kids or whatever it is, like if you have a passion, just start Googling it. And I'm sure that there's an organization near you that would love for you to volunteer or could use some financial support or maybe even some, if you're a business-minded person, some advice on how to run their company. Like there's so many ways you can serve. So I love that, just getting out there. That for anyone who's like, oh, it's just, I can't do that work so far. Just a reminder, there's so much work you can do.
So much work.
Probably on the street you live on. There are people who could use some help from you. But what about the woman who just feels so overwhelmed, so stretched thin? Like she sees people on the street or at the store that she knows are in need and her heart breaks for them. And she hears what you're doing in the Amazon and with Justice Mercy International. And she's like, oh, like I want to pray for those people, but I don't know how I'd ever find the time or the money or the energy to even attempt to help these other people. What would you say to her?
Well, my guess is that if, you're talking about a woman who's incredibly overwhelmed, my guess is that she's overwhelmed because she's trying to work and she's trying to raise a family. I mean, there might be other reasons, or because there's some extenuating circumstance in her life. And so I would say, well, if you're overwhelmed because you are trying to keep down a job and you have kids, well, then your ministry is for your kids. If you're overwhelmed because your marriage is hard and you're trying to do these other things, well, then that's a big ministry. Serving your spouse. And so I would just say, like, it depends on what the overwhelming is. But if it's overwhelmed with family, or if it's overwhelmed with serving in your church, or you're trying to be at work so that you can provide for your kids, or whatever, then I would say, well, those are good things. Now, sometimes we're overwhelmed because we're stretched doing things we're not supposed to be doing. Maybe we're working too much for money that we don't even need, or for just our own status, or we're spread too thin because we've got our kids in things that they don't need to be in, or whatever. Right. Those things. But I would say if you're overwhelmed because you're trying to do your best for the people around you, then that's the ministry right now.
Yeah. No, that's good. Give yourself grace and know that we can shine Christ light anywhere we are. Whether that's giving another kid a ride to practice, or like you said, if you're overwhelmed at work, maybe it's just being really kind to your coworker, or asking one of them to join you for like in the cafeteria for lunch so they're not sitting by themselves, whatever. Like there's ways where we already are, where we don't actually have to extend ourselves more than we already are, really, to be able to shine Christ's light and serve someone else.
Exactly. Wherever you are, just have that mindset. Yeah. That's great.
Another way that helps us kind of get into service sometimes, I think, is community. I know you talk about community a lot. We certainly see the women of the Bible in community. You talked about Elizabeth earlier, and she and Mary really needed each other in those moments. And she was such an encouragement to Mary. And we know that Esther depended on Mordecai and some other people in her community to fast with her. And I know you have another book on Ruth, like she and Naomi's friendship, so important. So how can having a community actually help us serve others?
Well, we need each other. And the Christian faith is not a private faith. It's not an individualized faith. It is a faith that is collective. Even the Lord's Prayer, he teaches us to pray, our Father who is in heaven, and give us our daily bread, forgive us our sins. And I think it's not that it's not for the individual, but it's for the individual collectively. And that we're all to be together. We need each other. We need the body of Christ. We see a lot in the New Testament talking about, just like the physical body has an eye and a hand and a foot, so the spiritual body has different gifts. We are not meant to walk life alone. We're going to need each other to hold us up in hard times and to cheer us on in good times, and to bring their strengths, and for us to be able to give our gifts and serve others with our strengths. And so it's how the Christian faith is set up. It's Christ is the head of his church. It's a body of believers.
Yeah. And I think with that community, it could be you want to go serve somewhere and you're not sure, like, I might be nervous going there. I don't take a friend with you, right? Like,
Yes.
or if you feel
Yeah.
a need in your community and you see a need of someone who needs care or needs help and you don't know where to start, enlist some of your pals to help you get it started. Or you see there's something at church that they need volunteers for, and you have a couple friends who you haven't had a chance to get together with. Combine it, get together with them by serving at that thing at church, right? Like, I think our friends can build us up and stir one another on to love and good works, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we read in Matthew there about how, like, Jesus is really inviting us to serve all these people in need. And we know that it blesses those around us when we love on them, but it also blesses us when we love on others, which I think is so cool that God has wired us that way, that even scientifically now neuroscientists are finding that we get like boosts of oxytocin and dopamine, happy chemicals in our brain when we serve others, which, like, what a gift from God that he is blessing others and blessing ourselves when we're doing it. That I just think he's so cool like that. We've heard about some of the great work that you do, Kelly, but can you share a specific moment in time when you were serving, like your intent was to help someone else and you actually received blessing?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really think just about almost every encounter I've had in the jungle with these different pastors and their wives have been such a blessing to me because of their faith. And, I think of one woman, she's since passed away, but she had cerebral palsy. Her name was Clarinia, and she was in a hammock. She spent her life in the hammock. She didn't have speech, and she, couldn't walk. And I remember a friend of mine saying, like, oh, hey, we're going to go into this house. There's a child that has cerebral palsy, and we're going to, just bring some encouragement. Well, the child was my age. She said child because the mother was there, taking care of her.
Right.
But
So it was her
it was
child.
her daughter. It was
Or it
someone's
was her
child.
daughter. Yeah, right.
I walked in, and I think Clarinia was just a couple years younger than me. And at the time I was in my 50s, and I was wrecked before I was blessed, because I was just could not believe her life. I couldn't believe how hard it was. It shocked me. I just wasn't expecting to see what I saw. And so I sang her this song about the song that I'd written about the Lord being our portion. But I started crying in the middle of the song because I was just so convicted of the things I complain about and the pettiness. And my friend was like, Kelly, remember, we're here to encourage, and Clarinia, even though she couldn't speak, and even if she could speak, we would have spoken different languages, we could still communicate. And she thought it was funny that at the end, my friend translated to her saying, I know we're supposed to be encouraging, and here Kelly's crying. And so every time I would visit Clarinia, she would laugh. And I would say, do you remember the time when I came and it was so awful? And she would be like, yeah, I remember. But it was a blessing. God used that as a blessing to remind me of so many different things. But one, that Clarinia is now home with the Lord. And that was a long, long, long span of time that she suffered. But like Paul says, that the sufferings of this life are not to be compared to the glory that will one day be revealed. And that means that the length and the depth of her suffering, though, can't even be compared to the glory that she's experiencing now, but one day even in full when Jesus returns, and we have the complete new heavens and new earth and all of it. But I was ministered to. She humbled me and reminded me of what is important in life. She always challenged my relationship with the Lord. So yeah, I could give you 100 examples of that. I think it's so true, though. You're exactly right. When we serve, we're blessed.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. And I love that even singing the song you wrote to bless others and intentionally singing it there to Clarinia to bless her, like God reminded you that he's your portion.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
What a good Father we have. Mm-hmm. All right, Kelly, since the name of this show is Brave Woman, Mighty God, I ask each guest what's something brave you're going to do this week. So what's something brave you're going to do this week?
Well, let's see. This week, I don't know about this week. In the next couple weeks, I'm about to open my house back up for about 20 somethings coming over to my house to study the Bible. And I don't know how brave it is, but it is one of those things where I wasn't sure. We did this in the fall. I wasn't sure if we'd have 5 or 6 people show up, and it kept growing and growing, and it's been really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's one of those things where we can think like, oh, my house has to be perfect, or I've got to have this, and it doesn't. You just have to be available and have to be ready to let people in.
Yeah. Another great reminder that we can serve others without being perfect. Just
Yes.
like right where you are in your own house, you're a Bible teacher. So you open up your front door and you teach the Bible, and like
Right.
it's a blessing and it serves others. And I'm sure those 20 somethings will bless you as well in the process.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's going to be awesome.
Well, I will put all the links in the show notes, but please remind everyone how they can find you, and also maybe tell them you said you have a couple spots left on your upcoming trip. So tell people how they can find out about that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. So kellyminter.com is just where all my resources sit, and we'll basically just link you to Amazon, but you can go there first. And then justiceandmercy.org, justiceandmercy.org. And if you go and you root around, you'll be able to find that serve and study trip. And if for some reason you can't find it, just email info@kellyminter.com and we will get you where you need to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the incredible work that you do. And thank you for your time today sharing with us about some of it, and also inspiring us to do the good work where we are. You're such an inspiration, Kelly. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate so much you having me on the podcast. I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me as I chatted with the lovely Kelly Minter. What great reminders of how we're called to shine Christ's light right where we are, and that there's so many ways we can do that. Get creative, grab a friend, ask Jesus about it, and help someone else see God's love for them. It will also bless you. To find out more about Kelly, her Bible studies, music, and Justice and Mercy International, I put all the links for you in the show notes. I've also put in links to a couple of the organizations I spoke about, like Sleep in Heavenly Peace and Shoes for the Shoeless. Make sure you're subscribing to Brave Woman, Mighty God podcast so you won't miss the next awesome episode. And for more ways to tap into the courage our mighty God has empowered you with, grab a copy of my latest book, Brave Woman, Mighty God, designed for individual or group study and available at booksellers everywhere. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening in on. Reviews really help others find this content. I'm praying for you as you intentionally, courageously step into whatever God has for you this week, and that you remember, mighty Jesus loves you and will give you everything you need.